Thinking about the complaints process now, what was the step-by-step process for making a complaint after an inspection?
So we encourage childminders, leaders to raise any concerns during the inspection with the inspector and call the provider contact helpline, which is the telephone number that will be given during the planning stage of the inspection. And then if a provider, childminder, continues to be concerned and feels things haven't been resolved, then they, within 5 working days of receiving the draft report, then they can follow the formal complaints process. But there's also an opportunity to raise any factual inaccuracies when you get your report as well, which will be dealt with. So at the point of draft report, there's 2 options. You can actually go back and say, actually, that bit's wrong. That's not quite the right word for whatever it might be, or can go down the formal complaints process.
And what evidence can childminders provide to ensure that complaints are considered fully and fairly?
So childminders can be guided by the online form, and I would suggest, follow that online process. But it might be worth just to kind of capture a few notes. We encourage childminders to take notes as part of their feedback from the inspection, just so that they've got that there for when, for once the inspector's left and actually, what was it the inspector said during that final feedback? So just kind of reflect on their inspection and think about what it is that they've got a concern about. And I guess it will depend on what they've got a complaint about, will depend on what they need to put forward.
And how long does the typical process from submission to outcome take?
So we aim to, because we know it's a worrying time if, a childminder or a provider feels that something hasn't gone as well as it should have and want to make a formal complaint. So therefore, we will usually respond in writing within 30 days.
Okay. And how transparent is the feedback given to providers after a complaint's outcome?
So absolutely transparent. It's a very detailed response. As part of the process, the person looking at the investigating officer, looking at the actual complaint, will contact the childminder, and it might be that some things may get resolved at that early telephone stage, but we will always respond with a formal outcome letter, and it will address each of the points that the childminder, the provider, has raised.
And is there any appeals process if a provider disagrees with the complaints outcome?
So all of this is set out in our complaints process, which is published. So what happens is we will, if we've got something wrong, we'll put our hands up and say, we got that wrong. But we'll also explain the reason when, it is the right outcome. But if the childminder provider still is unhappy, they can go to the independent adjudicator, can't they?
Yes. Yeah,
complaints adjudicator.
Yeah. And as much as we want childminders to feel necessary to use the complaints process, I think many childminders still feel afraid of using it for fear of repercussions, as you would say. So what can we do to ensure that they feel safe about making complaints and there's no repercussions affecting their kind of judgment or grading?
I think, first of all, we can reassure that actually, because we have heard misconceptions that if I make a formal complaint, that's going to go against me next time I have an inspection. Yeah. But absolutely, it doesn't. The person then doing that next inspection will not know that the childminder has made a complaint. So I think that's one important thing to say.
But we also do a panel, we do regular panels across the year where we look at closed complaints, and we invite external representatives to come to those. So we have held some with childminders, as you know, and we'll be doing another one. So we'll always look at closed complaints, and we'll, childminders in particular have said they found that really, really helpful because it's helped them to understand how we look into complaints. They've seen exactly what happens to that process of how that complaint is scoped, how it's then checked with the childminder who's made that complaint to check that the person investigating has got clarity around what the issues were, and then they can look at sort of how they've spoken to the inspector and how they've gathered all that evidence together. And it's really helpful because it can help childminders to see when things have gone wrong and when we have said, yes, actually, that has gone wrong, and we've sort of taken account of that. But equally, it can help them see that actually, no, where we made that decision, that was the right decision.
And this is the evidence.
Yeah, and this is the evidence. So
this is why
we get to look at all of that evidence and look at how that's sort of come about. And the feedback's been really, really positive. About they feel really reassured at how much in depth that we look at it.
And
so,
how seriously we take those complaints. And Angela, you've been to the panel,
so,
haven't you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was impressed with how seriously and how thorough and robust the process is. And I wouldn't have known that as a provider. You know, so it's involving childminders in that panel is a really positive step to dispelling the myths and promoting or supporting the transparency of the process, really, because it is thorough, it is in depth, and it is all taken seriously.
Yeah.
And that's what we want people to know, isn't it?
Yeah.